It was the mailman who found me. 3 days had passed. The television was still on, the same game show looping. My body slumped in the recliner like I'd just dozed off. But I hadn't. I was gone. No calls from family, no texts. Just 32 missed calls from the bank where I used to work. Not one from a person who loved me, because no one did. Not anymore. I started working when I was 17. I never took a vacation. Not one. I paid for my sister's college, then her kids. Helped my cousin out of bankruptcy. Took care of my mom's hospital bills until her last breath. Though I missed her funeral, I was in a quarterly review. I built everyone else's life while mine stayed, paused. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I'd be appreciated, remembered, needed. Turns out, I became invisible. My wife divorced me the same year my son dropped out of college. I didn't know he'd changed his last name. The last time we spoke, he told me, "You were never really here, Dad." And he was right. I missed his childhood chasing numbers, bonuses, and promotions. I believed providing was enough. But love needs presence, not just provision. But before I died, I wrote letters. Dozens. Not to my ex-wife, not to my sister, to someone else. Someone I never told anyone about. A boy named Caleb. The only person who might still carry my name. And the one who never even knew I existed. I started working at 17, not because I wanted to, but because someone had to. My father had left long before memory could hold his face, and my mother, God bless her, was drowning in shifts at a local diner. My little sister, Emily, had asthma so bad, we used to count the seconds between her breaths on cold nights. Work wasn't a choice. It was a lifeline. I stocked shelves at a grocery store after school, then full-time once I graduated. My hands learned the weight of responsibility before they ever held a diploma. I didn't go to prom, didn't take senior pictures. I was too busy calculating how many hours I needed to cover Mom's rent and Emily's prescriptions. But I had a plan. Always had one. And I chased it like hell. I clawed my way into a teller position at Midwest Bank after 2 years of night school. I wore a tie that didn't match my shirt and shoes that pinched my toes, but I smiled. I shook hands. I said yes, sir, and absolutely, and I'll stay late. Promotions came, slow at first, then fast. It was during my associate manager training that I met Mary. She was studying business administration at the community college and worked part-time as a barista. Her laugh made silence feel inadequate. We clicked, awkward at first, then inevitable. We moved in together within 6 months, married a year later. On our wedding day, I wore the same cheap watch I'd bought at a pawn shop years before. The ceremony was small, intimate. But the honeymoon night? I missed it. I got called in to cover a branch audit in Cincinnati. Mary spent our first night as husband and wife alone in a Holiday Inn, still wearing her dress. She told me later she cried until morning. I promised it would never happen again. It did. We bought a 2-bedroom ranch house in the suburbs. I painted the nursery myself. When our son, Ethan, was born, I kissed his forehead once, then went back to the office. There was a quarter-end reconciliation I couldn't miss. I told myself, this is what good fathers do. They work, they provide. The money came. And so did the promotions. Assistant manager, branch lead, regional supervisor. I bought Emily a car when she got accepted to college. Paid off Mom's medical bills when the cancer returned. Sent checks to cousins I hadn't seen in years. I was the rock, the constant, the wallet. And still, I believed I was winning. Mary quit her job to raise Ethan. She never complained, at least not at first. She made photo albums, packed school lunches, taught our son how to tie his shoes. I watched from the doorway some nights, too tired to join, too busy drafting emails on my phone. I promised them a vacation, promised we'd go to Yellowstone or maybe Disney. We never did. By the time Ethan was 10, he'd stopped asking when I'd be home for dinner. Emily graduated with honors. Her twins followed. I paid for their tuition, their laptops, their dorm deposits. I never missed a payment. But I missed birthdays, baseball games, parent-teacher conferences, first crushes, first heartbreaks. Mary began to change. Not all at once. Slowly. Like seasons shifting while you're still wearing last month's coat. She stopped leaving dinner in the oven, stopped asking me about my day. She filled her time with volunteer work, book clubs, yoga. One night I came home earlier than usual. It was quiet, too quiet. I found them in the kitchen, Mary and Ethan. He was about 16 then, tall, angry in that silent teenage way. Mary had tears in her eyes. I stood there, invisible, just long enough to hear Ethan mutter, "I don't need him, Mom. He's never really been here anyway." They didn't see me. I went upstairs, closed the door, and stared at the mirror. There I was, 53, regional director, six-figure income, respected, reliable, alone. My office walls were lined with awards. My desk had a plaque that read Excellence in Leadership. But no photos, no drawings from my son, no love notes from my wife, only numbers, always numbers. I slept in that night's suit, didn't even take off the tie. And in the morning, I did what I always did. I went to work. Mary didn't slam doors. She didn't scream or throw things. She simply began to disappear. At first, it was the little things. Her coffee mug no longer sat beside mine in the sink. The light in the bedroom was off when I came home, even if it was only 9 p.m. The fridge filled with food I didn't recognize. Vegan, gluten-free, things Ethan and I never touched. Her calendar started to include events I knew nothing about. Book club at Sandra's, brunch with the girls, yoga retreat weekend. I never asked. I was busy, always busy. Then there was the Facebook group, Strong Women New Chapters. I saw it once over her shoulder as I walked past. Their motto was, "You don't need to be loved less. You need to love yourself more." She never told me what it meant to her, but she started quoting lines from it when we did speak. Philosophical stuff about presence, vulnerability, and emotional safety. Meanwhile, Ethan lived behind a closed door. Music thumped through the walls day and night, the kind with no lyrics, just bass and rage. He stopped looking me in the eye, started locking his phone, avoided dinners, skipped family outings, what little of them we had left. I once asked him if he needed anything for school. "Yeah," he muttered without looking up. "An ATM that doesn't pretend to be my dad." I laughed at the time, like it was a joke, but it wasn't. Emily, my sister, had flourished. Her boutique design firm was featured in local magazines. Her twins were Ivy League bound. At a cousin's wedding, she introduced me as our family's sponsor, with a wink. I smiled, pretending I didn't hear the laughter that followed. One afternoon, I stopped by her office unannounced. I was in the neighborhood and I thought, maybe lunch? She wasn't at her desk. I waited. 10 minutes, then 15. From the hallway, I heard her voice. She was in the conference room, door slightly ajar. "No, he doesn't ask for anything. That's the beauty of it," she said, laughing. "John? He's a sweet, dumb workhorse. We just need to keep the sob stories flowing." A man's voice replied, low and amused. Does he really still think you all love him? He wants to, she sighed. And as long as he keeps paying, let him. I stood frozen. Something inside me cracked then. Not shattered, not loudly, just a soft, sickening split. That night, Mary suggested marriage counseling. She had brochures already printed, names highlighted. It's not about blame, she said. It's about finding each other again. I have a quarterly report due next week, I replied. Can it wait? She smiled, but not kindly. You've been asking me to wait for 20 years. A few weeks later, a letter arrived from Ethan. He'd been accepted into Harvard's pre-law program. The envelope was thick, personal. I never opened it. I put it in the drawer with the rest of the mail. I figured I'd get to it once work slowed down. It never did. The biggest blow came not from Mary, not from Ethan, not even from Emily. It came from a chance encounter. I had left my laptop charger at home and returned mid-morning, something I never did. As I walked up the drive, I saw Mary standing outside the front door. She was laughing, with someone. It was Greg Holloway, her high school boyfriend. The one she'd told me had once broken her heart in senior year. They stood too close. His hand lingered a moment too long on hers. They didn't see me. I waited until he left, then entered quietly. Mary was in the kitchen, humming. You seeing Greg? I asked, flat. She didn't flinch, just wiped her hands dry with a dish towel. He's just a friend, she said. I nodded, even smiled. Of course. But she didn't meet my eyes. That night, I sat at my desk staring at the unopened letter from Ethan, the one I had ignored. I picked it up, held it, put it down. Then I opened another browser window. Email, deadlines, numbers. It was easier. The lights of Las Vegas blurred through the tinted windows of the limousine. I was sitting next to my regional director, half listening to his jokes, half watching the neon reflections slide across my whiskey glass. That night was supposed to be the beginning of a new chapter, Senior Vice President, West Division, a title I had chased for 3 decades. They toasted to me at dinner, clapped me on the back, told stories about my loyalty, my stamina, my work ethic. I smiled through it all, pretending not to notice the silence on my phone. No messages from Ethan, no calls from Mary, just numbers, always numbers. It wasn't until the next morning, hungover, empty, that I noticed the calendar notification. Ethan's graduation, 10 a.m., Harvard Yard, family seating at 9:30. Panic didn't come. Not guilt, just a dull throb. I had already missed so many things. What was one more? I flew home that night, walked into a house that no longer felt like mine. The silence was surgical, too clean, too final. No keys on the hook, no shoes by the door, no photos on the mantel. The walls were bare in places where frames used to hang. The fridge was empty except for a single takeout box with no name, no note. On the kitchen counter sat a manila envelope, my name written on it in Mary's handwriting. Inside, divorce papers, signed, filed, and a letter, short, cold. John, this isn't revenge. It's relief. You stopped showing up years ago. I just finally stopped waiting. Mary. There was another envelope, this one smaller, sealed, heavier. I opened it and unfolded a printed copy of Ethan's graduation speech. He hadn't sent it. She had. I read the first paragraph 3 times before I could continue. And when I did, the words twisted like a knife. Today, I stand here because of 2 people. My mother, who never missed a moment, and my mentor, Greg Holloway, who stepped in when someone else stepped out. I carry their names with pride. Greg Holloway. He'd taken my place, and Ethan had taken his name. The speech ended with a quote about fatherhood, something about presence being love's proof. My name wasn't mentioned once, not even a footnote. I sat on the living room floor, surrounded by echoes. Not one photo remained in the house. Not of me, not of us. Just empty hooks and a silence that screamed. Days passed. I didn't return to work, didn't answer emails. I walked room to room, unsure if I was searching for something or punishing myself. Then I remembered Mom. I drove 6 hours to her small assisted living facility. The nurse at the front desk looked confused when I asked for her room. "She passed away," she said gently. 6 months ago. My stomach dropped. "No one called?" I asked. The nurse frowned. "Your sister handled the arrangements. She said you were unavailable." I stood outside her old room, staring at the closed door, unable to knock. The guilt was crushing, but it was the next visitor that broke me completely. A week later, a man appeared at my front door. Mid-20s, tall, nervous. He held a weathered envelope and wore an expression that mirrored something I used to see in the mirror. Confused responsibility. "You're John McKinley?" I nodded, hesitant. He handed me the envelope. "This is from my mother. She asked me to deliver it if I ever wanted to know where I came from." I opened it slowly. The handwriting was unmistakable. Older now, but familiar. Sarah. We had dated in college. Briefly. She left suddenly, transferred schools. I never knew why. The letter explained everything. She'd been pregnant, told her parents. They moved her out of state, changed her phone, erased her presence from my life. She'd written letters she never sent. Raised Caleb alone. Told him I was a good man who just didn't know. Caleb looked at me, his voice quiet. "I'm not here for money. I had to see who you were." I sat on the front step, letter in hand, heart hollowed out. 2 sons. One I lost because I was too busy chasing something I thought was love disguised as duty. One I never even knew I had. And in that moment, I understood the cruel symmetry. One boy erased me. The other never got to write me in. The resignation letter sat on my desk for 3 days. I rewrote it twice. The first version was stiff, professional. The second, too emotional. The third, just honest. I can no longer measure my worth in quarterly gains. I've missed too much. I need to go find what's left. I left the office without a farewell party. No cake, no speeches. Some shook my hand out of politeness. A few nodded with vague approval. But most were already looking past me to the next deadline. I sold the house within a month. The one that used to echo with Mary's humming and Ethan's footsteps. I kept only what fit into a small rental apartment downtown. A bed, a desk, a stack of unread letters. The rest I donated or threw away. The walls of my new place were blank. I didn't put up photos. I didn't have any left. Finding Caleb wasn't hard. He'd left an email in the return address line of the letter. I wrote to him twice, then waited. When he finally responded, it was short. Not interested in money, just trying to understand. I offered to meet. He agreed, on neutral ground, a park bench near a community library. He arrived in a sweatshirt, hands in pockets, posture guarded. We talked, not much. I told him what I knew, what I didn't. He asked questions I couldn't answer, about his mother, about why I never looked. I had nothing but apologies, and even those felt thin. At the end, he said, "Words don't weigh much when you've been absent your whole life." I nodded. He walked away. I stayed on the bench long after he was gone. After that, I started writing letters. Dozens. To Mary, to Ethan, to Emily, even to my old coworkers, not to explain, just to say sorry. None replied. I left them in mailboxes, sent them through email, folded them between pages of books I donated to the local library. Maybe someone would read them, maybe not. But I needed to speak, even if no one was listening. Caleb wrote again a week later. I'll meet again. Not for closure, just curiosity. That was something. I applied to volunteer at a local church daycare. I figured if I couldn't be a good father to my own son, maybe I could be a good presence to children who had no fathers at all. The woman behind the desk looked at my application and frowned. I'm sorry, she said. With your age and lack of childcare experience and the current climate, we're not accepting solo male volunteers. I didn't argue. I just nodded, took back the paper, and left. That night, I sat in the pews during an open sermon. The pastor spoke about redemption, how it isn't earned through punishment, but through persistence. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the church windows in gold. I thought about leaving. Then I felt a tug on my coat. A small girl, maybe 7, brown curls, wide eyes, a smudge of paint on her cheek. Are you someone's grandpa? She asked. No, I said gently, just visiting. She studied me for a moment, then said, You look like mine. And just like that, she reached for my hand. We sat there for the rest of the sermon, her head on my arm, her small, warm fingers tangled in mine. No one interrupted. No one questioned it. The next week, she found me again, and the week after. Her name was Lila. Her parents had died in a car accident. She lived with an aunt who worked long shifts. She told me I smelled like old paper and peppermint sadness. Once, when someone asked her where her grandpa was, she pointed at me. That's him. I didn't correct her. I started coming every Sunday, not to pray, just to be present. Some of the other kids started joining. Coloring books, story time. I wasn't on staff, but no one stopped me. Caleb visited one afternoon, unannounced. He stood at the back of the room, watching as Lila drew a picture of us sitting on a bench under a tree. I didn't see him at first. When I did, I didn't say anything. He didn't either. But he stayed through the whole session, and at the end, he nodded. You're different than I thought, he said. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Maybe redemption doesn't come in grand acts. Maybe it comes in crayons and quiet company. In being there finally. Even if it's for someone else's child. The church hall smelled of glue and construction paper. I was reading The Velveteen Rabbit to a group of kids who didn't care about metaphors, just the sound of a soft voice. Lila curled against my side, holding a marker with no cap, her fingers stained purple. That's when I noticed him, Caleb, standing in the back of the room again, arms crossed, expression unreadable. I didn't wave, didn't interrupt. I just kept reading, slower, clearer, letting every word stretch across the room like a thread. When I closed the book, the kids clapped. Lila hugged my waist and skipped off. Caleb was still there. You come every week? He asked. Everyone. He nodded once. I didn't think you would. I looked down at my hands, still ink-stained from helping the kids color. I didn't think I would either. He left without saying more, but 2 days later, I found an envelope taped to my apartment door. Inside was a handwritten invitation. It read, Casual dinner. Few people. Thought you might want to come. Bring a story. At the bottom, in smaller writing, Ethan and Mary will be there. I stared at the name for a long time. Ethan. It looked foreign now, too sharp to belong to me, but it pulled something loose inside my chest. I didn't sleep that night. I ironed my only button-down shirt twice, shaved, stared at my reflection until I couldn't look anymore. The dinner was at a community hall. Folding chairs, paper plates. Caleb stood near the door, greeting people. He nodded when he saw me, handed me a name tag. John, storyteller. Inside, Mary was pouring drinks. Her hair was shorter, streaked with gray, elegant. She looked at me, surprised, then nodded politely. Ethan was across the room, talking to a woman I didn't recognize. He looked taller, older, worn in ways I hadn't earned the right to understand. I found a seat in the back, near a table of strangers. Dinner was slow, filled with small talk and awkward pauses. Then Caleb cleared his throat and stood. "I wanted tonight to be more than just food," he said. "I wanted it to be a space for stories, not just funny ones, honest ones." He looked at me. "John, would you start?" I stood, heart hammering, palms slick, walked to the front like a man approaching judgment. "I used to think being a good man meant never asking for help," I said. "That if I worked hard enough, paid enough bills, stayed out of the way, I'd be loved." I paused. But love isn't a reward. It's a choice. And I stopped giving people the chance to choose me. I disappeared. Into work, into excuses, into silence. I scanned the room. Mary was still. Ethan stared at his plate. "I'm not here to fix what I broke. I'm here to admit I broke it. And that I'm sorry." The room was quiet when I sat down. No applause, just the weight of unsaid things settling like dust. After dinner, Ethan approached. He didn't speak, just handed me a folded napkin with a scribbled line. "I see you're different." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. A week later, Caleb invited us all to a picnic. Neutral ground again. Lila was there, clinging to my leg. Ethan came late. Mary brought a fruit tart she claimed was from a store, but I knew her baking when I tasted it. The tension hung between us like laundry on a windless day. Caleb broke it with a question. "Dad," he said, then caught himself. "John, what were you most afraid of growing up?" I blinked. The kids had scattered. It was just us now. A table under a tree. I opened my mouth, closed it. Tried again. "Becoming my father," I said. He left, walked out, and never looked back. I promised I'd never do that. But I did, in my own way. I stayed in the house, but left every room. The silence after was thick. Mary cleared her throat. "You were never cruel, John. Just absent." "I thought providing was enough," I said. "Well, it wasn't," Ethan replied quietly. "But maybe it's not too late to be something else." That night, as I gathered my things, Ethan tapped my shoulder. "Come with me." We drove in silence, back to his place, a modest apartment on the edge of town. He opened the door, flipped on the light, and there, above the fireplace, hung a photo. Me, Mary, and baby Ethan, taken on his first birthday. We were all laughing. He saw my expression and said, "I found it in a box Mom kept. Thought it belonged up again." I nodded, unable to speak. It didn't erase the years, didn't undo the pain, but it was something hung back where it used to be. A picture, a possibility, a beginning. The folding chair beneath me creaked as I stood. The room smelled like coffee, dry erase markers, and nerves. Dozens of men, most my age or older, sat in a semicircle, their eyes tired, their arms folded. Some wore wedding rings, others didn't. Some looked broken. All of them were listening. The community center had called it Fathers in Transition, a support group for men trying to rebuild what they'd lost. Caleb had asked me to speak. At first, I said no. What did I have to offer? Regret? But he insisted. So I stood before them, holding a thin, worn notebook. The cover was cracked, the pages bent. Inside, I had written something I called 36 Lessons I Learned Too Late. I cleared my throat. Lesson 1, I said, voice low but steady. If your child asks you to stay home, do it. Work can wait. They can't. Some men nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably. Lesson 12. Silence isn't the absence of love, but it can be mistaken for it. I read 10, then 15. By 25, I had stopped looking at the page. Lesson 36. Presence isn't just physical, it's emotional. Be where your feet are, and let your heart catch up. The room was silent when I finished. Then a man in the back clapped, and another, and then the rest. Later, as they filed out, one stayed behind, mid-30s, eyes red. I haven't spoken to my daughter in 6 years, he said. But I think I'm going to write, I nodded. Do it, even if she doesn't answer. Do it anyway. When I got home, Ethan was waiting with a box in his hands. What's that? I asked. He smiled. Something you might want to pass down. Inside was a printed book. Bound, clean, simple cover. 36 Lessons I Learned. Too late. Thought I'd make it real, he said. I've been reading it to Lily at night. Isn't she a little young for that? I joked. He shrugged. Never too early to know what not to do. I laughed. It was the kind that caught me by surprise. Full-bodied, loose. It felt good to laugh without guilt. The next day, Caleb took me to the grand opening of something he'd been working on for months. A modest building, nothing flashy. But the sign above the door read, Time over money. A place for fathers to begin again. Inside were reading rooms, play areas, group therapy spaces. Caleb gave me the tour like a proud son, even though neither of us had ever called each other that. We don't fix people here, he said. We give them space to heal. He'd used some of the insurance money from his mother's estate. The rest came from donations. Some of it, he admitted, was inspired by my letters. He had read every one I'd sent. In the hallway, a mural stretched across the wall. Small hands, big hands, all holding timepieces. The caption read, You don't buy time, you give it. Ethan came that night with Mary and Lily. She was 5 now, had her mother's eyes and my stubborn chin. At dinner, she asked me, Why do you tell so many stories? Because they're the only thing I have more of than money, I replied. She grinned, showing missing teeth. Years passed in a rhythm I'd never known before. Quiet, rooted, Sunday dinners, story time at the center, walks with Mary that started cautious and ended in shared silence, like two people who no longer needed words to forgive. Then, one spring morning, Ethan showed me something new, a short film, professionally shot, titled The Unopened Letter. It told the story of a man who worked too much, loved too little, and wrote a letter he never had the courage to send. It ended with a boy reading that letter aloud to his own child. I watched it alone, in his apartment. When it ended, I sat in the dark for a long time. I didn't know you were making this, I said later. He shrugged, didn't know I needed to. The night before I passed, I wrote one more letter. Not to my sons, not to Mary, to Lila. I told her she made an old man feel new again. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up, briefly, to the sound of birds, the smell of coffee, and sunlight warm on my face. At the funeral, I was told, people came from everywhere. Dozens from the church. Kids who were now adults. Men who'd rebuilt their lives at the center. One man said, He never raised his voice, but he raised me. Ethan delivered the eulogy. He read from the notebook. Lesson 36, he said, voice firm. Presence isn't just physical, it's emotional. Be where your feet are, and let your heart catch up. They buried me with the notebook, but they carried the pages with them.